What if I told you that a video game was delayed due to the single fact that it had partial nudity in it? Yeah, let's get into it. Hello! Welcome to Brain Spill, the laziest show on the internet. My name is Tank, and that video game out of any is the legendary Halo 2. But how can something like this even happen? Why would somebody want to put this in such a game? Because out of any game, this is probably not the type of title that you expect to see something like this. Hot off the heels from the release of the original game, Halo Combat Evolved, released for Microsoft's own game console, the original Xbox, led the way, of course, to the sequel, Halo 2. This game, and I ain't even joking, for anybody that played it on launch, knows how popular it was and how hyped it was at the time. Because, guys, if it was anyone like me waiting to play it, every kid that was going to get this game would probably find some excuse to not go to school that day in order to play Halo 2. I mean, me personally, I skipped school because I was sick and... sorry. What I meant was, I was genuinely sick that day and it just so happened to be the same day that Halo was being released, so... yeah. As you might expect, a game of this magnitude would be rushed out the doors in time to make sure that they could capitalise on the success of the franchise. A few things might have just slipped through the cracks, however. Yeah, like someone's crack. That's right, there was an error message embedded deep in the code of the game, which, well, was some sort of error report which showed someone's peaches. Good job someone caught this, because if not, some unfortunate soul may have accidentally stumbled upon the actual error message when playing the game. They just weren't quick enough to get rid of the error message as this game was being printed and shipped around the world. Whoops. At the time, there was a lot of people throwing around questions as to who did this and who could have possibly been at fault for this and why it was in the game. But my question is more curiosity. Whose ass is it anyway? I was thinking that it could very well have been an employee of Bungie at the time, and hopefully it wasn't, because they would probably have had to get a swift boot out of the door when they realised that this picture was in the game. Particularly if it incriminated anybody because their cheeks got shown on a video game. You might think that this was all just a funny gag and it was all taken in jest. However, things at the time were a lot more serious than you might expect. Just prior to the release of Halo 2, there was another controversy in the video game industry having explicit content buried deep in the files of a game which were only just discovered right before launch. Due to the raunchy sexual content in copies of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, the game had to be R-rated for adults only. This caused many copies of the game to be taken off the shelves and replaced with amended copies of the games for later printings which removed this content from the files. Yeah, this was pretty serious stuff at the time because the content that was in those games was much more serious than the stuff that was found in Halo. I'm also quite surprised that the Grand Theft Auto series isn't just an 18+ anyway, but for this particular instance they had to because of the fact of what was in the game's files. And if you have no idea what was in the files, then let your imagination run wild. Yeah, you might find it's a bit odd that a game like this would be faced with so much controversy, seem as though that the whole point of the game is to go around, steal cars, do drive-by shootings, and basically just run amok around the city. But regardless of your thoughts on the situation, the game had to be released with an R rating, and this was commonly referred to as the hot coffee incident, something which is synonymous even today with games being released. You might also think that this is a lot of people who might be just blowing this out of proportion, but it wasn't so much the content in the games that gave people a fright, it was the game developers themselves when they realised that they got an absolute flurry of lawsuits as a result. As a result of this incident, the video games industry went through a complete overhaul as to how games are actually rated. Basically, if a CD print has sexually explicit content, even if it can't be accessed via normal means in the game, it has to be rated regardless. Hence why game developers are now incredibly thorough to determine if there is anything that might raise the rating of their game, even if it's not meant to be seen by the public. And this was the same fear that Bungie had when they discovered that this error message was in the game. If they had to release it with that in, the rating of the game could possibly go up due to the fact that some man's hairy arse is in the game files. And for a game that is so highly anticipated like Halo 2, this would have had a detrimental effect on the sales of the game, if it had to be raised to a higher age rating, basically on the fact of something which wasn't even accessible in the game to begin with. And that is an absolute no-go for one of the most hotly anticipated games of the year. The Entertainment Software Ratings Board made a statement to the press about the but, which reads as follows. After the M rating assignment was issued for Halo 2 for Vista, and just prior to the shipment of the game to retail, Microsoft notified ESRB about pertinent content found in a map editor tool that is being bundled with the game. The content in question, although likely to be inaccessible to the majority of users, displays a photograph of an individual showing his bare backside to the user when a particular error occurs, and thus warrants a partial nudity content descriptor in order to alert consumers to its presence in the product. Microsoft has therefore applied stickers with correct ESRB rating information to the packaging of virtually all copies that will ship to retail in the US and Canada. We have been advised by Microsoft that future runs of the game will be produced without the content in question, thus negating the need for the descriptor to be displayed on those versions. Whilst it's good that the entirety of the game wasn't delayed and it was only versions of the game being released for Windows Vista, it was still a big thing. And they were not really in a position to be able to ship the rest of them, knowing that this content was still in the game files. So they figured it would be better to simply hold back, remove the content from the game, and then that also means that they don't have to slap on a nudity label at the back of the game. This was to ensure that no bare arses were on show when the game was released. Any copy that was shipped with this content in it had to be labelled with partial nudity, despite the fact that the normal game is unable to access the error. It still had to have the notice on the game itself. Don't expect any brute strip teasers going on in your game now, guys. Really, I don't actually know how well known this actually was at the time when the game was released. When I was waiting for the game to be released on the Xbox, I had no idea that there was any delay of the game whatsoever. All I was doing was checking the tracking to make sure it turned up on the day. Thankfully, it did without issue. I wasn't getting it for Windows Vista, so that probably helped, but it's one of those things I just assumed would be interesting to talk about, particularly if you're a fan of the Halo franchise or just people's arses in general. So, what can we take away from this? Make sure that you don't put explicit content in your game when it's not meant to be there, but more importantly, maybe you shouldn't be having a picture taken of your bare arse in order for that to happen in the first place. If the ESRB don't have to scour your game for people's rears inside the game files, then you're probably doing something right. If you liked the video, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to be notified as soon as I upload my next video, be sure to hit the bell button. And if you've got any ideas for what videos you'd like me to discuss next, let me know down in the comments below. As always, sources used in the video will be in the description. Now, with the upcoming release of Halo Infinite, hence why I'm making this video, algorithm and all that, I kinda hope that something similar happens for that game. I hope that one developer just thought it would be cheeky to slide something in there which is not meant to be in the game, and I think it would be pretty hilarious if history decided to repeat itself. Now, I don't want anything too explicit in there, but just something cheeky enough to kind of get people flared up again. I think it would be a pretty interesting story. So, will they learn from their mistakes? I guess we'll have to wait and see. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.